I do business completely differently than all other real estate agents. And one of the ways I'm different is that I'd like to just take things one step at a time.
The more you fight, the more money the attorneys make, which comes out of the estate. Newer agents can learn a lot from this. Podcasts of yours, they can get shortcuts on education.
So if you were on a game show and you had to guess for $1 million what a buyer would realistically pay for your house today, what would that be?
Like in Central Texas, you're my go-to for anything probate that needs to be sold.
Welcome to the Texas Probate Real Estate Podcast. My name's Jeremy Kritt, and I'm the owner and broker of Kritt Real Estate and the founder of Texas Probate Real Estate. Today, I have a very special guest, Joseph Michael Dickerson of the J.M. Dickerson Law Firm, and he is an attorney here in Central Texas, and he's going to talk to us today about his practice and about some things related to probate real estate that would really benefit our clients, our prospects, and just the general public who's going through a difficult time in probate or maybe just starting the process. I really want to welcome you, Joseph. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Jeremy. I'm really happy to be here. Looking forward to
Awesome.
having a nice chat.
That's wonderful. I want to start off with a little bit about yourself and your law firm. Share with us a little bit about your firm and also, more importantly, about you. How did you get into law and what areas of law do you practice?
Okay, so I got into law decided to go to law school in the early 90s because the economy was not good, so it was easier to keep going to school. But once I graduated, one of the things that drew me to probate was while I was studying for the bar, I was also clerking with another attorney, and we were handling some big estates and big at the time. So I wound up getting exposed to the whole probate process and a lot of the estate tax issues and how those things are affected. And it really intrigued me. So that drew my attention to the estate planning and probate. And you can have a great estate plan, but you're one lawsuit away from losing it all, then what was the point? So we also like to focus on the asset protection side of the whole outcome.
That's very interesting. I want to go a little bit into probate now more specifically, and I want to cover an area that maybe we don't normally talk about in the program. We've had other attorneys on the program here on the show, and we've talked a lot about general things related to probate, like the process and things like that. But I think what I want to do, and I think it's just because I feel very comfortable with you, Joseph. You have a very, very friendly, very chill vibe, and I really like that. You're kind of like the attorney I would want to have, to go in your office, feel very comfortable. So that's good.
And you'd get a cookie.
I want to, my God. Okay. So I know you're my people. I know you're my people when you say something like that. So I want to talk, I think in this podcast with you about things that are a little bit more like outlier, because we've covered a lot of the process and, you got this many years to do probate and things like that. But I was wondering if you could share with me maybe a few cases that you've had in the past where it's like maybe that experience kind of makes you think, man, I wish if people would have known this like in the beginning before they came to my office, this would have been much better for them. Could you run us through some of your experiences? Because I think that those kinds of experiences are very helpful for our audience because a lot of times people are watching this and they've just started, maybe someone's passed away and they're just starting on their first steps. And there's so many little mistakes you can make that can become a big deal later. Is there anything you could share with us like that?
Yeah. So one of the things that comes to mind, and it's the opportunity to do a more summary probate. So there's a thing called a muniment of title. You may have covered it before, but basically it's a summary probate. It just the process transfers title. The problem is that only works with real estate.
Okay.
And I know this is mainly the thing that we talk about here, but unfortunately what we have found is the clients, a lot of times they come in, hey, this is the only thing. And then we already start the process. And then it's like, oh, by the way, we found a bank account and we don't know how much money is in there and they won't tell us, but they're not accepting the muniment of title.
Okay.
The lesson is make sure you dig in to find all of the things. Look through the mail. Make sure you give
Mhm.
it enough time to go through the mail to make sure that any bank statements or brokerage account statements have come in. Fortunately, there is something we can do. We can amend it to be a full administration. However, that winds up costing more money than they had originally planned. So nobody likes surprises, and some people not even on their
Mhm.
birthday. But that would be one of the things that's important to have that, and it's really important that we have all of the property listed when we do those muniments. So those are some of the things. That's one of the first things that comes to my mind. If you were coming in, one of the things to really be prepared on is have a good idea of all the different types of assets, because even though we're focused on real estate, there are other assets that can wind up getting stuck. And sometimes we can get a local bank to accept it, but it's a nightmare when you talk about national and regional banks. They're like, nope, we don't know what that is, and we're
Mhm.
not going to accept it. Sorry, go get me letters of administration or letters testamentary.
Right. Yeah. Um, do you find that so how often do you see that kind of come up in your practice? Do you find that quite a bit? I mean, it's is that it's fairly common?
It's common, but it's primarily because people are trying to find the least expensive way to get through it. So that kind of is one of the things. Another problem that comes to mind is when it's the second spouse has died and we're trying to now probate this spouse's estate. Then they go to somebody like you to say, hey, let's, we already transferred title to our names. We're ready to sell. And the title company does their title search, and it's like, well, who is Mr. Such and Such? Because he's still on title. It's like, oh no, he died 20 years ago. Well, nobody ever did anything. So now we're kind of stuck. And then the client's like, hey, wait a minute, you did the probate. Why didn't that take care of it? Well, we did the probate for your mom, but your dad's estate was never handled. You guys never did anything. And since mom lived in the house and really nothing really affected her, she was still able to do everything. She didn't do anything. So now 4 years have passed. We can't really do anything. So now we need to look at doing an affidavit of heirship. And not all title companies will accept that affidavit of heirship. Typically, when it's been so long, they usually will. But inevitably, they don't have to unless it's been seasoned for at least 5 years. So that's
Yeah,
one of those tricky things.
yeah, it's interesting, and but you had a video, a reel talking about community property and this issue, and it's funny, as a real estate broker, I actually have come across that quite a bit because there's such a misunderstanding about how that works. People just think that it just automatically transfers to the other spouse, and I'm kind of curious. Is that something for community property states? Is that something uniquely in Texas, or is that fairly common in other community property states as well?
I think it's a community property issue. Technically, if the children and it's a statute, it's the inheritance
Mhm.
statute. So who is it that inherits? So if the married, if you die and you're married and you don't have children, well, your spouse inherits your community property. If you do have children and your children are the same children as the deceased children, starts getting into spider webs, then the surviving spouse inherits the community property. If they're not the same children, then the community property goes to all of the children. So it winds up getting very complicated. And when you've got blended families, I've got 7 kids, and 4 I got new, 3 I got secondhand, but I love them all. But it's a perfect example of, things don't automatically go that way. And when we say automatically, in theory, the surviving spouse inherits, but on legal title, that hasn't happened. You still have to do something to get legal title in the name of the right person.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very interesting how misunderstood that is. I do see it all the time, and they think they're ready to go. I mean, they want to sell, and it's like, no, no, we're not. Yeah, and actually, it's interesting too because a lot of agents. This is one of the reasons why I do the podcast as well. I think it's good education for real estate agents.
Yeah.
A lot of agents don't have this kind of knowledge, and sometimes they'll go ahead and they'll list the property, and it's a problem because now you have a buyer. They've gone through financing. Maybe they've made plans for they've sold their house or they have a lease that they've cut short, and it can actually cause damage to other people because you didn't know this
Mhm.
little piece of information. And just to ask a few questions, before you take that listing. Absolutely. Let's talk a little bit about human relationships. So one
Okay.
of the things I have noticed, we already know this is all where it goes wrong here. But as a real estate broker that really has a focus on probate, it is a really large part of my business, and so I'm dealing with people going through this process all the time, and I'm always amazed at the complicated relationships that exist in the family system. I had someone actually, Joseph, reach out to me a couple days ago. Mom had died. Mom had a school friend who she allowed to live with her. There's no tenant. There's no lease agreement. Pardon me. So it's completely informal. She doesn't want to bail. She has nowhere to go. Now they have to possibly evict her, and then also he doesn't get along with. He's the independent administrator, but he barely has communication with the siblings who are the heirs. So it's just completely crazy, and he's really stressed out. But also with these complicated relationships, often there's fighting and there's conflict, and so I think I want to start with what's your advice to people starting this process? Let's say things are a little bit icy in the family, and they're icy and spicy. Okay. And so there's some landmines in there. What's your advice? Like, or what have you seen, or what could you tell someone going through the process?
So one of the things I tell clients is, look, the more you fight, the more money the attorneys make, which comes out of the estate. And my personal goal is to try to get you through the process as quickly and efficiently as possible. But if everybody starts fighting, well, number one, it's going to take longer. Number two, it's going to be more expensive. I'll give you an example. Last year we had a case where we had a will, and the executor that was named in the will was not who everybody expected. And so the kid that had been helping mom during her last years, and there were questions whether he was skimming or things like that. So there were questions there. But when he found out he wasn't the executor, he just said, "Okay, well, I'm not going to cooperate. You figure out where everything is." So once we got to the process of getting the executor appointed, she had to, tooth and nail get all the information, and so that wound up taking longer. So they start egging on the rest of the heirs. Hey, she's probably hiding something, keeping things from us. So the thing I would say there is be transparent. Make sure you're very open as to what's going on. And the people who need to be open are the executor with the heirs, not the attorney. The attorney has a attorney-client privilege. I can't be divulging things unless I'm specifically directed. But I'll tell you what wound up happening is he egged them on enough that they hired an attorney to look and see what I was doing, and he did nothing but attack and challenge every step of the way, making it take way longer. Give you an example
Yeah.
of what the fees wound up. Our fee quote had started out at $8,000 if there was no fighting. By the time we were done, all the attorneys, so we wound up with 3 attorneys in the case.
Wow.
It wound up at $33,000.
Wow. Wow.
So, and here's the kicker. Everything got distributed exactly the way it was going to be distributed under the will, which is
Wow.
exactly what was going to happen, except they took this detour that they thought was going to make things go faster, didn't do that, did the opposite. They thought it was going to make it more efficient, wound up being more expensive. So that's kind of what I would say is try to look at it as a process that we need to get through the other side. Once you get to the other side, you never have to deal with these people again. Even if they're your family, you don't want to have Thanksgiving dinner, you don't have to. The thing that's connecting you, we get it done. But the more you fight, the more difficult things get, the more complicated
Yeah.
and the longer it takes.
Yeah, yeah, that's really unfortunate. That's a really unfortunate story. That's very sad. And it's says something also about you. You're trying to be economical, right? You're trying to make it, simple, but then people just, they go off on a tangent, and before you know it, they're $30,000 into a legal bill. It's interesting, as I'm hearing you on the real estate side frequently, and I think this is something that is very important when you're selling real estate that's in probate, is really being inclusive of the heirs or other people that are involved. A lot of times, it's like you got the executor or the administrator, but they're acting in consensus with other family members or trusted advisors or whoever. And it's a really big mistake. I learned this very early on in my real estate career. It's a really big mistake to just, to not ask like who else is involved, how many heirs are there, are they, I know you're the one that's designated as and appointed, but are you making your decisions with other heirs or other people, and to get those people on the call,
Mhm.
when you're doing a listing agreement. Also, like, if you get an offer, make sure everyone's on board, everyone feels good about the price, everyone feels good about the terms, things like that. Because if you don't, well, for one thing, if you don't do that, you may not even get the business because you do your little presentation. Then those other people weren't with you on the call or with you in person. So they don't really, they're not going to be able to relay what you said, in the same way that you were able to do it. So it's important to have everyone on board. And, I was having this conversation with another attorney with regard to affidavits of heirship, where it's even more important to have everyone on the same page. So one of the things that, when there's affidavits of heirship, when that's part of the mix there, I always want to know, like, how many people are involved, because if it's like 7 people, sometimes I'm just like, I'm not sure if I want to do it, because it's like, if you're not all like truly like in alignment with each other, it's like, I'm not sure if I want to handle it, because it's just, it's a lot of work. If there's like a lot of, bickering back and forth. Also, it kind of creates a more liability for me as well, because if they have a problem, then it's like, oh, well, I could be a very easy scapegoat for a bunch of family members that are not happy with how it's going. Relationships are super important. Are there any other experiences or outlier cases? I think I'm going to make this kind of the
Yeah. Do,
feature of
do,
our time here together.
do you mind if we,
Yeah,
we kind of stick with this title side of it?
yeah, 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 please. Oh, wait, I forgot one thing, Joseph. Before you get
Yeah.
into that, I just want to share one thing. Tell people your work and title, because that's actually, I forgot to mention that in the very beginning.
Right. So we also represent a title company. We're a fee attorney, and so we represent Texas Lone Star Title. So we do the escrow agent side of it. The title company does the actual search and title commitments. But one of the things that happens sometimes is, even when there's a probate and there is an order appointing the executor, and it's an independent, and they've got the buyer, they've got everything ready to go. Some title companies will say, well, our underwriter wants everybody, all the heirs, to sign the deed. That gets complicated when not everybody is necessarily in agreement with things. So you can't always get a consensus. And sometimes, hey, we have an order, the judge has approved this sale, so that's why we're doing it. And sometimes they say, okay, yeah, I get it, but I want to make sure that everybody signs off. The reason is, and I'm going to dip my toe into title real quick, is because title insurance premiums are regulated and they're based on the value of the transaction. So unlike with life and health, where they say, okay, how sick are you? Okay, this is how much I'm going to charge you because of how sick you are, how likely you are to die before the term ends. I can adjust how much I'm going to charge you just for the risk. Title companies can't adjust that risk. They can't adjust the price. So they put more requirements to reduce the risk. So I try to explain that to clients when title company says, hey, I need everybody to sign off. We try to argue with them to, maybe can we move to another underwriter? Because we have the order from the judge. We have all of these things. But sometimes, that's kind of what we have to work with. And we need to kind of be prepared for the underwriters to have different requirements than just what the law requires.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really, and I think what's interesting about that is, I'm just looking at just strictly from the broker point of
Hmm.
view. You don't want to get to that stage and not to work out,
Yeah.
you know. And a lot of people, it's interesting because the general public, they just think like they don't understand what's involved in a real estate transaction and all the moving pieces and all the players that are involved. It's a very complex transaction. Even residential real estate, it still is there's a lot of pieces involved, and you don't want to get to that end point and have that problem. That's why, in my process, and I try to tell this to agents I sponsor or just any other, sometimes people come to me for advice, other agents come to me for questions and things. And I'm just always like, look, when you take that listing, you want to ask questions, right? So especially if it's probate, right? You want to ask
Mhm.
all of these questions. And you know what? Don't try to jam the transaction through. This is one of the things, it's funny. At one point in my brokerage firm, I'm not sure if it was a little bit of insanity, temporary insanity, but I thought that my dream was just to have all these agents working under me, and I'm gonna have this huge brokerage firm, and I did. At one point, I had like 20, 30 agents, but it was a lot of supervision. It was a lot of people doing things that I'm like, oh my god, why did you do that? And I'm like, maybe it's better just to be more solo. I'm also a little bit more profitable being solo. But the thing is that one of the problems that a lot of agents have is they're trying. I call it ramming the transaction through. In other words, it's like, okay, I got a client. Okay, let's sign him up. Let's just go 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 go, and then we'll figure it out later. And that's usually when you have problems, right? So you always want to, in the very beginning, ask questions. Okay, they're in probate. Okay, well, have they been appointed or not? Because if they have been appointed, you're not. You can't do business anyway, right? Some agents will sign people, they'll put people into listing agreements when actually the person has no authority. Actually, I'll tell you something interesting about that, Joseph, and I think you'll like this as an attorney. You probably won't like it as attorney, I should say, is in the probate space. So this is actually kind of interesting. I understand it from a sales perspective. I understand the agent, they have a prospect in front of them and they like each other. They want to do business. And so it's like, they're like, okay, let's get them to sign something so that way they're locked in. And a lot of agents that do probate around the country that do more probate transactions, as kind of their niche, they'll contact someone who has filed and they'll put them into a listing agreement. And when you hear them talk, you'll actually even hear this on YouTube sometimes, like sign them up as soon as possible. And if they don't become appointed, then you can just tear it up or whatever. And it's like, well, that's not the right order of doing business. That's not, it can get people into trouble, but that's not the right order of doing business. And even when people do it the right way and they start doing a transaction, they're rushing and they're not really focused on the client. They're not focused on where's this client at? What do they need? What's the process that's going to bring them to success? Not just getting a commission. You're going to get paid. If you do your job correctly, you're going to get paid. You have nothing to worry about. So focus on the client. And that's something that I feel a lot of agents, I'm not saying all agents, I'm not trying to throw them all under the bus, but a lot of agents, they're just, they're not focused on the client. And that's something I tell my prospects that I'm talking with. I'm just like, look, it's just one step. I do business completely differently than all other real estate agents. And one of the ways I'm different is that I like to just take things one step at a time, step by step. You're not ready yet? No problem. We'll just keep in touch. We're in follow up, but you got to have patience to have that follow up, right? You got to have patience.
Yeah.
Joseph, tell
Can I
me
just add
what
something
other,
before you go? I want to just comment
yeah,
a plus one on what you're saying.
thank
A
you.
lot of times, what happens when they rush this and they get them signed up, they undermine the trust of the person who's appointed. Because, hey, wait a minute, you signed all of this stuff before you were even appointed. So you had it planned that you were going to sell mom's house from the beginning. When were you going to tell us?
Right.
And they may all have been at Thanksgiving saying, hey, you know what? If mom goes, no, none of us really live in this city. None of us are coming back. So we should just sell the house. I mean, that's what makes sense. Mom says, yeah, once I'm gone, you guys don't even live here, sell the house. But the fact that the paper was signed before the appointment, before everybody talked, it creates that mistrust. You were trying to do something behind our backs. You were getting ahead of the game. And unfortunately, human nature doesn't assume you didn't tell me something because you're trying to keep me from having to worry about it. It's the opposite. You didn't tell me something, you must be trying to pull a fast one, or else you would have just told me.
Yeah.
So anyway, I don't know
Yeah.
if you've kind of experienced that when you see these agents that kind of jump the gun, and then winds up leaving a bad taste in everybody's mouth.
Yeah. Well, I had very early in my career, I had a couple situations. I didn't mean to do wrong. It's just new and inexperienced.
Hmm.
And,
Yeah,
when I was new, it was like, it's just like, wow, okay, I got a client. Oh, okay, let's get this going. Yeah,
yeah,
let's get this on the market.
yeah,
Let's go. And then you realize that, like I'll give you an example. A long, long time ago, I had a situation where um, there was a lot of children involved, and he had adopted some children. It was very complicated. In fact, I was like kind of like I was over my head. Like I just, I mean, like I had not seen this before, and I had no idea what I was doing. Thank God my client loved me. Okay.
yeah,
Thank God he loved me. Okay. Otherwise, it may not have been as good.
yeah.
And I listed the property. We were marketing the property. We started getting offers. The market was a little bit hotter at that time. And then we started getting all these. The title company was like, hey, Jeremy, because I had open title there. And they're like, Jeremy, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, I have no idea what's going on. Like, what is
Yeah.
it? So that's where I was learning on the job, and that's when I realized it's like, okay, and this is years ago. This is like
Yeah.
2017. And I was like, okay, I'm moving too fast. I actually said that to myself. It's like, okay, I'm very energetic. I'm passionate. I love what I'm doing. But it's like, first of all, there's a knowledge gap that I have that I need to shore up a bit. And also just, I need to ask more questions. It's like, if I would have asked, these things, I would have been like, okay, hold on a moment. Maybe we need to figure this out before we list the property. And again, I think that this is the challenge in real estate, Joseph, is with a lot of agents. And it's very interesting from where I stand now, because this is going to be my 9th year in real estate, and I'm a real estate broker, and I own my own company. And I'm not saying that because, oh, Jeremy's great and he's like the best person. No, I'm just saying, like, at like where I'm standing now, it's like I bear like full responsibility for all of my stuff. I can't hide, oh, my broker, I didn't know, it's like there's kind of no excuses for me. And so, when you're at that level, it's like you're dotting your I's, you're crossing your T's, you're making sure that your paper is rock solid, that, everything is in alignment. You're in alignment with your clients, you're in alignment with your paperwork, the transaction process, everything. But when you're starting out, again, it's like you don't know a lot. And also you're like, you're just trying to move quickly. And so it's interesting. What I really believe, especially like for something like, or if you're dealing with like divorce, or you're dealing with sales that have elements to it, it's not just like Tiny Tim and Sally Sue, and they got a job transfer, and now we're just selling the family. When there's other things involved, you want to have a process, right? You want to have a process. You want to have a checklist. You want to have, a set like intake of like what's going on here, so you understand all these things. I've developed all these things over time, and when I sponsor agents, I try to share, my systems with them. But also, just like if anyone's watching this, it's funny. My podcast is getting a little bit more views on Spotify and stuff now. So I don't know who's listening out there, but if you're an agent listening to this, I mean, you got to start developing a process, and that's sort of the difference between just an agent and becoming a pro. Because unlike the law, which and Joseph, I don't, maybe I come at it with a little different perspective. I have a degree in philosophy. Maybe I could have been a lawyer if I had the thought, since I have a degree in philosophy. But I have a degree in philosophy, and I have 2 other degrees that are totally unrelated to real estate, because I was a teacher before. So I have that kind of like checklist kind of process
Mhm.
mentality. It's just comes from my other life. But yeah, I mean, you want to have a set process. And what's amazing is that when you have that process, your clients are more likely to follow you. Like if they feel that you have like a path for
Mhm.
them, they're going to follow you down that path. And in a sales process, you kind of need them to follow you because, like, for example, for a house, it's like, okay, I have a very good sense of value. I have a very good sense of how I want to sell this house. Maybe it's a house that was a hoarder house. There's a strategy I'm going to use for that. Maybe this house is more kind of luxury kind of house. Okay, we have a certain way we're going to position that property, but I may need the seller to do certain things for me, to not necessarily do things to the house, but to do, and if you don't have a set process, you're no longer in control of the sales situation. And when you're no longer in control of the sales situation, it's like they're running the show. And yes, they are the deciders. They are the ultimate decision makers. But a good agent's going to guide them into that process, and they're going to make the decision you want them to make for their own good, right? For their own good, because it's going to be good for them. And so it's very hard because, as you know, Joseph, a lot of people don't know is that 75%, roughly around 75% of agents did not sell a house last year.
Yeah.
And the average agent's only doing 2 or 3 deals. So it's like most agents actually don't have a process of any kind, actually. They're kind of winging it every transaction.
Yeah. And so, one of the things that I have noticed that there are more licenses than there are transactions, I think. And so
Yes.
if you start doing the math, it's like, okay, well, how are all these people realtors? And it's like you said, there's a difference between being a professional and having a license. So it just means you could pass a test and sit for so many hours of CE. But you need to have systems to run your business, to run your processes. An analogy that we like to use a lot is with a doctor. When you go to the doctor's office, you got to fill out forms. And those questions, hey, do you have this? Is this a symptom? Have you ever had this before? Have you ever had that before? All of the things that they need to know to be able to rule out you have this family history or you have had this before. These are all symptoms of this thing having come back. So if you have your checklist of, hey, these is this in probate? Are all the heirs aware that the property is going to be listed? Where are you in the probate process? Have you already been appointed? Has the property been ordered to be sold, or are you an independent administrator? Oh, all of those little triage questions puts you in a much better position to see, okay, what do I need to do next? And so definitely having systems and checklists are extremely important. We have that in our practice, and that's why our practice is very limited to probate, estate planning, real estate transactions, asset protection with business entities. So all of those things kind of play with each other. So we try really hard to not we don't take on divorces. We don't do personal injury cases. We don't do any of that stuff because it allows us to focus and have our systems work in the processes that we know. And kind of like going back to what you were saying when you were starting out as an agent, this will be to quote Alex Hormozy is, everybody sucks at the beginning, because you don't know what you don't know and you need to learn. And so as you learn, you get better and you improve, and then you get to the next level. And I think, the young, and I mean that in years in the business, newer agents can learn a lot from this podcasts of yours because they can get shortcuts on education. They can learn from the experiences that you're sharing with other professionals on here so that they can learn, hey, Dickerson was talking about this issue, or Jeremy was talking to somebody else about this issue, and they can learn and accelerate their education where they don't have to have gone through the mistake of, I listed the property and the client didn't get appointed because there was a will contest. So you kind of, you got that shortcut because they watched this video and they said, oh yeah, I guess I better make sure that my guy is actually able to sign. Just with that, they've gotten ahead of the game. So you're providing a really good education to anybody involved in these types of transactions.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and we want it to be helpful, to everyone, to other agents, to probate executors, and probably attorneys are not as interested. I think I found that some attorneys. Okay, thank you. I appreciate that.
Before I let you dig into that, let me tell you why I say that.
Okay, please.
So I have dealt with lots of professionals in different areas, and some of them know more law about that one thing than I ever will, or that most attorneys do, because we don't cover one thing every single day. Probate real estate transactions. That's a very niche subject matter. And so you may be super aware of how all of that works, but then maybe the whole probate process is not as but us attorneys need to also step back and realize other people have very specific, very focused knowledge that we may not be that deep into, but it may be applicable in this situation to dig deep. And why are we going to go and spend a bunch of time and energy digging into that when somebody has already gone there and all we have to do is confirm? So we as attorneys need to listen to other professionals, even if they're not attorneys. Just because you're an attorney doesn't mean you know the law, and any attorney should know that. And so when you're in transactions with other professionals, I always like to be open to learning. It doesn't mean that they're always right, but there may be something that I'm not aware of. So
I
I
really
think that's
like
something we
that.
should learn. We can all learn from each other.
I love that. I love that. And that is, I just love that you said that, because I have that philosophy, to have a little humility. And we all have to have a little bit of humility and to be open. And the moment that we think we know it all, that's when we've really lost the plot, and I have found, and I try my best to have that humility, but I know I've experienced it. This is a normal human experience where you realize you think you know what's going on, and then you get punched in the face, and you're like, oh, wait a minute, I didn't know that so well. I've had that happen to me, at least.
Mike Tyson says everybody comes into the ring with a plan until they get punched in the mouth.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. One of the interesting things that I've noticed, and actually one of the reasons why I started this podcast stuff is that, like, it's like, hey, I'm doing all these probate transactions, but like I never talk to the attorneys, right? So I'm like, okay, I need to start talking to attorneys. And, that's also one of the reasons kind of why I started the podcast as well. But it's interesting that attorneys, they don't know a lot of what's going on with the real estate, what's happening with their client, with the property. So, like, I was having this conversation with another attorney on the podcast that the minute a filing happens, investors from all over the country descend on the person who filed. Okay. They're getting letters, they're getting text messages, they're getting calls. And what's happening is that they're getting inundated by all these messages about how to deal with the property. Right. And I found that a lot of attorneys actually did not know that. They don't know that their client is getting
Hmm.
absolutely bombarded most of the time with offers and things like that. One of the things that I try to do in my communication with people, that personal representatives, is to point out that these people that are contacting them, it's not that they're bad people. It's not that they're running a business. It is a legal business that they're running. But, you have this personal representative they're a little bit in a vulnerable spot. If the executor is out of state or they're far from the property, that property can be a burden for them. It's kind of something that they have to deal with. Maybe it's like, okay, there's a mortgage on the property. It has equity, and maybe they're using personal money to keep it floating until it's kind of figured out. There's all kinds of situations I've come across. And then the investor comes in and says, hey, look, I can buy this house cash, quick, no questions asked. You don't have to pay a realtor commission, which I'll get back to in a moment, right? Everything's fine. And it's like, the average person does not know a lot about real estate, right? In my experience, right? The
Hmm.
average person has a very rudimentary knowledge of real estate. Homeowners tend to have a sense of value, but if you're not, if you're not in the area or you have not transacted a lot, you may not have a good sense of value and just the whole process in general. And so they'll hear something like no real estate commission. They go, there we go. I'm going to save some money, right? Of course, they're buying it, 40%, 50% below market value. So if you had my commission in there, my commission would be so tiny compared to the
Hmm.
spread they're making on this. And I also point out to a lot of personal representatives that most of those people that are contacting them are actually not the end investor. They're wholesalers. They're just making a contract and then they're just flipping the contract. They have no intention to actually buy the property. They're trying to go find another buyer, and frequently they'll hold up the property, and sometimes they'll file something on the property saying that they have this contract on the property, and then they'll try to find a buyer, and sometimes they don't even find the buyer. They can't even they've got this property. It's like there's no buyer, and then they have the seller has very little rights, or maybe I can't say no rights, but their rights are really curtailed because the contract's not it's not like a Trek contract. It's not it's like some proprietary contract that some real estate guru. Usually it's some guy that went to a seminar.
2 o'clock in the morning that they signed up
Yeah,
for.
yeah. Or to $9.99 webinar or something,
Yeah.
and so now they think they know what they're doing, and they gave them some document to use. And so what I tried to do is, and I have this on my website as well, is like, I want to make contact with those people. I'm like, hey, if you have an offer, meet with me. I'll go over the offer with you, and I'll tell you what I think. Yeah, no obligation. I'll just tell you what I think. Because the thing is that they're being bombarded by all these people, and a lot of people will end up selling. Not a lot, but a good number will end up selling to these quote unquote investors, and they're losing tens of thousands. I mean, I've seen, not hundreds and hundreds, but maybe $100,000 of lost equity because they just made kind of some real estate decisions that were not really smart.
Yeah.
The reason why I got into that line of thought was because I noticed a lot of attorneys did not know that. They don't know, like they're not aware of wholesalers. They're not aware of these people. And so like there is value to having a real estate professional
Yeah.
that understands this process, understands as well, Joseph, this is another thing. So agents tend to be very vain people. Okay. If you look at real estate, I'm in this industry, and this is, First Amendment right. I can say what I want here. It's my podcast. I can say what I want here. But real estate agents tend to be very vain in this way. Like it's all about them. The marketing is often not about the client. It's about how great they are, how amazing they are. Here I am. Here's the house behind me. Look how fabulous I am from my picture that's from 10 years ago. And a lot of houses in probate, they've got deferred maintenance. They have maybe a bad roof. The mom was a hoarder. It hasn't been updated in 10 years or something. And a lot of agents, they don't want to list a property like that. They will try to get maybe some investor friend that they know and be like, try to do some off market thing, which is not really usually in the best interest of the client, right? The client would benefit from having the house fully exposed to the market and having competition for the property, driving that price up to the most the market will bear. Most people, in my experience, would want that if they knew about it. But a lot of times they don't know about it. And you'll have an agent come in and say, well, you got to repair this. You got to do this to the house. You got to do all this stuff. And they don't have the money. They're already thinking they got to pay the attorney. They got to do this. Maybe they're trying to keep the house going, and they can't do all this stuff. And a lot of agents think that that's what they have to do to sell the house versus, there are strategies to sell these houses on the open market. And everyone will do better. Everyone will make more money. Everyone will be more happy. And so that's why I want attorneys that are watching this to know that, it is important to have an agent or broker that they know that can handle these kinds of properties and understands the context of what's going on around these kinds of transactions.
So I'll tell you, unfortunately, a lot of times us professionals, we tend to get into silos. Hey, this is my part. You do your part. I'm not going to tell you how to do your job. You don't tell me how to do my job. But which is fine to have respect for each other. The problem is when my job affects your job or your job affects my job. And ultimately, both our jobs are to take care of the client. And so it's important to have that communication. And for us attorneys, it's important to have good professionals that we can rely on for your knowledge. Like in Central Texas, you're my go-to for anything probate that needs to be sold. And I have somebody else here in Webb County because I know you're not in Webb County, and real estate is location, location, location. So you've got to get to know who knows what they're doing in that area, going back to the how many licenses there are and how many transactions there are. Anybody can be, I don't mean to sound flippant about it, but anybody can be a realtor or have a real estate license, but not everybody can be able to service the client to understand the property value. I personally have just gone through that. I've gone through a friend of my wife's representing us in a trying to sell a property. And even because she represented us buying the property and we paid too much, but we were at the top of the market. So we probably, and she kind of says, well, you wrote the real estate book. You wrote all of these things. You should know. And I was like, well, yeah, but you need to save me from myself sometime. But now I'm trying to sell this property and I'm already gone through 3 brokers and none of them could sell it. None of them got me a single offer. And none of them, up until this one lady that I'm talking to right now, said, look, this property isn't worth what you think it is. This is probably how much we'll be able to get for this. I mean, this is really, honestly, this is where you're at. And I'm sorry that you paid too much for it, but if you want to sell it, this is pretty much it. So finally, somebody tells me the way it is. That's so much importance in a professional, because if you don't tell the person even things that they don't want to hear, you're not helping them. Because now I've had this property for 3 years. I've got property taxes. I've got all of these expenses. And now I'm going to have to take a loss when I do sell it. But if I had taken a loss earlier, there would have been less taxes that I had paid. So it's important to have that communication and have the right people. That's the other important thing is, if this is what you want to do, you need to educate yourself. You need to make sure that you call Jeremy and you say, hey, Jeremy, can I just follow you around for a day so I can see what you do and how you do things, so that I can know kind of what it really is, and not just look at me, I'm this. You're absolutely right. This is the realtor selling themselves is not really what is going to sell the property. You've got to focus on getting the property out there, getting people to see the opportunity for the buyer to look at the property.
The way you said something very interesting, Joseph, we have a industry insider lingo called buying the listing. I don't know if you've heard of this, buying the listing. Can you guess what that is?
Basically, you get the property listed and then you sell it to somebody else for a fee split or something. That's what it sounds like.
Well, okay, yeah. So buying the listing it's a common terminology in real estate sales training, and that's where I go to a seller and I know they want X for the property, right? And they're very anchored. They're very anchored into that price, and so I go there. So I do what every other real estate agent has done, except I've done it correctly. I've done the market analysis, right? And I've gone there and usually before I go to a listing appointment, and every good agent should do this, it would be like, hey, I always phrase it like this, Joseph. I go, Joseph, if you were on a game show and you had to guess for $1 million what a buyer would realistically pay for your house today, what would that be? I don't care what you want. I want you. I want to know what you think a rational, sane person that hasn't had too much to drink, okay, what they would pay for your property today, and they'll give me a number. And then sometimes that number is close to what I think that value is. And by the way, that answer is not going to affect my opinion, right? It's not going to affect what I think it is, but I just want to know where their head's at. It's like, okay, sometimes it's close. Like, so if it's like within like a certain number of standard deviations, it's like, this is not going to be difficult for us, but sometimes it can be way off. Now, sometimes it's way off because they think that what they're going to tell me is going to change what I am going to tell them or think or something like that, which is not the case. And sometimes it's just, they're just wrong. And a lot of times the lower the equity, the more aspirational they are, the more they need the money, the more crazy that number seems to appear. And of course, as we know, the market doesn't care what you think or what you want. It's just buyers out there buying in the market. And so there's a choice that every agent has to make in this business. You're either going to be a straight shooter and tell people the truth, and you have to be okay with you might lose that business. If business is scarce, if you're going through a dry period, you may be tempted. The devil on the left side here might be tempting you to buy that listing. In other words, telling them, quoting them, if you will, a price that it will not sell for. And the idea is that a motivated seller will get their head bashed in by the market And then eventually they will come to their senses and realize, okay, Jeremy, I got to sell this property. Okay, then we start going into the price reductions. Now, in a declining market, that's a disaster, right? Because now we're chasing the market down and you're going to end up selling it for less than you would have sold it for. But the other way is to say, hey, look, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, I've done what every other agent has done, except I've done it correctly. I've done a market analysis. Near as I can figure, your home is worth X. And you know what? It is what it is,
Yeah.
because here's the other part of it, Joseph. If you don't do that, you're like the other two agents that you fired or let go, right? Because it
Yeah.
doesn't sell, right? So
Yeah.
anyway.
You don't get anywhere. You don't get anywhere that way. Now, to the defense of those guys, this is a commercial property, which is a little more
Okay.
complicated.
Mhm,
And
mhm.
the appraisal district had it appraised way like they were smoking stuff. They had gone up to Colorado before they did their. Literally, I bought this property for 430,000, and the next year they raised the value to $960,000.
Oh, wow. Okay. Okay.
So it's like I'm like, man, I made a great deal. Look, it's worth 900,000. Somebody write me a check. I'll let you have it for 8, and you get a heck of a deal. And so nobody was willing to tell me, hey, the appraisal district's not right.
Mhm.
This is a realistic number. It was like, Mike, I know you're stuck on this number. Well, that's what we'll go with. Instead of, okay, let me tell you the way it is. I know that that's what the appraisal district says. I know you think that the market is hot and you see all of this opportunity with this property, but realistically, right now, this is what you're likely to get. This is what I'm seeing in the market right now. These are the sales, and this is your property. These are comparables, and they're selling at this. Yours is missing these things, and this one is got this, and it's selling for under the price that you want. What do you want to do? But if from the beginning you just say, look, this is what it is, and if you don't want to list it with me, that's fine, but I'm giving you the numbers that realistically is going to happen. And so
Yeah.
that I think is invaluable. And yeah, you're going to have some people who don't buy, so to speak. But what's going to wind up happening is they're going to wind up getting stuck because it's not going to sell.
Yeah.
And the thing is, a lot of times these agents think that they're going to win by, well, once they get an offer, they'll start changing their tune. Sometimes the number's too high. They go, well, they're never going to take a lowball offer, so I'm not even going to bother.
Mhm.
The other thing is, once you've had to go down on the price, you're pretty frustrated with your agent because, hey, didn't you tell me that I was right on the number, and now we've had to reduce it and reduce it? Oh, well, it's the market environment right now. 6 months ago, what was the big deal 6 months ago? Why didn't it sell then? And you
Yeah.
kind of burn yourself if you can hold on and get a deal done within your listing agreement. That's fine, but they're never going to recommend you because they're going to
Yeah.
say, "Oh yeah,
That's right.
he just blew hot air up my skirt, and that was what he was good for." But when it came down time to the brass tacks, we wound up at a different price. He didn't get me
Yeah.
as much as I thought I should have gotten. But if you start them off at the beginning, hey, this is a realistic number. Then if they want to go in with their eyes open, great. If they don't, that's fine too. They're eventually going to come back and say, "And Jeremy was right. This is how much where we wound up. If I have to do this again, I'm just going to start with him because he gave me the straight scoop." So
Absolutely. Absolutely. I have really enjoyed this podcast. We're coming up about an hour now, and I know that you're busy. You've got your clients that
yeah,
you need to contact, and I want to really thank you for doing this podcast with me. Thank you for coming on. You're my people. I love your sense of humor and your perspective. So I'm so glad that we connected. We found you through one of your reels. I want to really encourage you to continue with your marketing. I think you're doing really a great job. That's definitely how we spotted you. We have a talent scout out there looking for talented lawyers. So that's how we found you. And thank you so much for providing your perspective. I know that your time is very, very valuable. And I want to thank you so much. One of the things we like to do on the podcast is we want to really make sure that our audience can find you. if they've been listening to this, maybe they want to hire you, maybe they want to call you, contact you. How can people get in touch with you?
Okay, so one of the best ways is to go to our website, and that's dickersonlaw.com. And Central Texas is dickersonlawcentraltx.com. Either one of them, you'll be able to get a hold of us. We also have a landing page with different evergreen webinars on different asset protection and estate planning topics. And to go there, it's dickersonwebinars.com. And a lot of times you can get a lot of free education by watching those videos. And we have them in English and in Spanish.
And I forgot to mention this at the very beginning, but you're a very prolific author. Can you tell us a little bit about some of the books you have and where they might be able to find those?
Sure. So a couple of our books are on Amazon, and some of the other books we just keep them in-house for our clients. I guess the two latest ones I'll share with you, it's this one, The Dirt Bucket. So my main book that I focus on is the 3-bucket method for asset protection. So the Dirt Bucket talks about real estate, the real estate bucket. And so I'm going to get you one of those when you and I have lunch.
Thank you.
And then my latest one is this one, Passing It On, which is our book on estate planning and plan to avoid being in probate. It's a lot easier to sell a property in a trust than it is going through the probate process. And so those are some of the books. There's 6 in total. It's the Roadmap to Rich, the 3-bucket method for the trucking industry, the Texan's Guide to the Probate Process, the Dirt Bucket, and Passing It On.
Wow, that's a lot of material. That's a lot of material. That's awesome. I look forward to reading those books. And again, thank you so much for joining us. Again, my name is Jeremy Kritt. I'm the owner and broker of Kritt Real Estate and founder of Texas Probate Real Estate. If you ever need help with real estate in probate, contact me. All of my information is in the description. Also, all of the information of our wonderful guests here will also be in the description. There'll be links, phone numbers, everything there. So please get in touch if we can help you. And I look forward to seeing you on the next one.